Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Israel confirms that the body slated for return yesterday was not part of hostage Syria Idlib. Israel accuses Hamas of violating the ceasefire agreement and demands the immediate return of Syria and all remaining hostages. A series of 3 public buses have exploded in Tel Aviv in a suspected terror attack. No casualties so far have been reported, and Israeli authorities discovered 2 additional devices that failed to detonate. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calls for stronger ties with the United States following a meeting with US envoy Keith Kellogg in Kyiv. This appeal comes amid criticisms from Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who accuse Zelensky of being despised by the people of Ukraine. The US Senate begins a series of votes to boost Donald Trump's agenda with a $340 billion budget blueprint. Kash Patel is also confirmed as FBI director. We begin with a developing story from Israel. 3 buses have exploded in Bat Yam, just south of Tel Aviv, in a suspected terror attack. Israeli police say devices in 2 other buses failed to detonate, and security forces are now sweeping the area for suspects. Transport Minister Miri Regev has halted all public transport to allow urgent security checks. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered an intensive operation against terror hubs in the West Bank and heightened security across Israel's cities. No casualties have been reported, but footage shows at least 1 bus in flames. Authorities are urging the public to stay alert as investigations continue. For more on this discussion, we are joined by Joyita Basu, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, and we're also joined by Josh Barnes, correspondent and anchor. Josh, I wanted to come to you first on this. Could you give us some of the updates of things that are going on around these explosions, these buses that have explosions just south of Tel Aviv?
Situation is evolving. It's a developing situation. Based on what we know so far, there are 5 explosive devices that were planted in buses in Israel close to Tel Aviv. 3 of them exploded, 2 failed to do so. One of them, there was 5 kilograms of explosives and a 5-kilogram device that was discovered unexploded. Now, there are fears that potentially more bombs have been placed. Of course, as you mentioned already in your summary there are investigations and searches ongoing. Public transport has also been stopped. I think the relief is that nobody was hurt. We know currently the situation in Israel and across the Middle East in general is very, very stringent. There's a massive amount of tensions ongoing. So all this does really is adds to that. It fans the flames. A ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel, of course, is hanging by a thread. Discussions globally about what to do are also at the thoughts of many people's minds within the region. So this is only just emphasizing that, and the security risk that face many Israelis living in their country is there, and the fear is there. That's what a terrorist attack is. It's there to invoke fear, and this has certainly done that.
Joyita Basu, what can you tell us about this suspected terrorist attack that has just occurred just south of Tel Aviv amid a fragile ceasefire with Hamas? Joshua, what can you tell us about these operations in the West Bank that Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated that he is expanding?
Yes, so off the back of these attacks, off the back of these terrorist attacks, Netanyahu has been staunch in his response. He said that specific incursions and investigations will take place. Special military guards and officers will be sent to the West Bank to investigate what is happening. Of course, this for him is worst case scenario. His show of strength, his show of force throughout the conflict with Hamas has been something that has been popular within Israel. But this strike within Israel's borders, a terrorist-style attack is going to be met with the strongest response. Now, whether he stops at just these investigations in the West Bank, we might see further strikes, there might be further action, but it remains to be seen how far he does go. We know he's already lost support of some of the further right-wing members of the Israeli government over the Hamas ceasefire deal. Many wanted Israel to continue in their military response and assault on Hamas operatives rather than this look towards a ceasefire deal. So Netanyahu, who faces pressure, he's not holding the government in Israel by many seats. His majority isn't massive. So his response needs to be strong on this, and I think that's what we will see.
Thank you very much. Joyita Basu, I just want to get some of your insights regarding these bus explosions that have just happened in Tel Aviv. This is obviously a developing situation, and there has been no confirmed group behind this attack yet. But what can you tell me about it?
Well, it seems 3 buses exploded and unexploded, I think, explosives were found in 2 more buses. Thank God that, these were empty buses, because you see, these explosions had taken place when, there were people in the buses, it would have been a massacre. Just imagine 1 by 1, 3 buses or 5 buses blowing up, and even if at least each bus had 30, 40 people, that would have resulted in the deaths of more than 200 people. So you see, I would say, and this is the thing about Israel, this is the kind of threat that they face every day. But what the change that we are witnessing in Israel is that, change in the complexion of exactly the kind of terror attacks that are now happening in Israel. Because all these days, such attacks, where the civilians are being targeted in these kinds of attacks, they had, to an extent, it was not that extensive in the last few years, although it was there earlier. That is because Hamas in particular was using long-range missiles, Hezbollah was using long-range missiles and all these things. Now, what Israel has done is that Israel has taken care of these terrorist groups. Hamas is actually decimated. Hezbollah is also more or less decimated. So what these terror groups can do is that, it seems that, now they are again going back to these soft targets from inside Israel, these small terror attacks. It is not small when it comes to, ultimately when the scale comes to it, it is not going to be small, of course. Now, but the thing is that in the domestic terrorism kind of a situation they are trying to create, instead of these missiles coming and raining down on civilians, which was the practice in the last few years. But this is also, this is also a very dangerous phase. Primarily, it shows that the militant groups, the terrorist groups, may have lost their military arsenal, may not be in a position to wreak the kind of damage that they hope that they would be able to by, these constant attacks on Israel, on the military bases, and even otherwise.
Yes.
Mossad headquarters, Iran was also doing all that. From that, these kind of terrorist attacks, what happens is that the focus is on civilians, the casualties are likely to be very high. So as a result of which, I think this is a very dangerous, this war is entering a very dangerous phase now.
We thank you very much for joining us. We now move on to some more news from the Middle East. A deadly explosion in Syria's Idlib province has killed 8 people, including 3 children and 2 women. The blast was caused by leftover war munitions stored in a house by a scrap dealer. A child was also injured. Rescue teams recovered bodies from the rubble, but authorities fear further explosions. The incident highlights a growing crisis. Experts warn that up to 300,000 unexploded munitions remain across Syria, putting over 15 million people at risk. With farmers and children among the most frequent victims, aid groups are calling for urgent action to clear these hidden dangers. For more on this discussion, we are joined by Joyita Basu, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, and we're also joined once again by Josh Barnes, anchor and correspondent. Josh, I was wondering, could you tell me a bit more about what's going on with this explosion that has happened from old munition in Syria?
Yes, it is an absolute disaster that has been described by authorities, but it's almost the disaster that was always going to happen. You mentioned already between 100,000 and up to 300,000 of a million explosive devices remain unexploded. And this situation that we've seen is something that could be made a regularity if we have this situation moving forward. Now, the impact is devastating. We've seen 3 children die, family members die, and the impact is huge. Of course, a scrap dealer who had these devices, the building was destroyed, and civil defence forces have been investigating. But the question remains, what can be done with so many of these devices potentially out there in Syria, potentially there to explode at any point? They're unpredictable. It takes something small potentially for these devices to explode. So it really is a case that what can be done to make sure this doesn't happen again. The situation in Syria, it's devastating. The situation is dire. The place needs rebuilding in lots of places. So to see this happen is a real gut punch for the Syrians who are finally looking forward following over a decade of civil war and then also the ousting of Bashar al-Assad.
Joyita Basu, I wanted to come to you next. What does this reveal about the after effects of such a long and oppressive regime that people are hoping for a new Syria, a new democratic Syria? What does this mean for the people there? It's such an unfortunate thing to have happened.
Well, it seems that around 100,000 to 300,000 unexploded munitions are scattered all over Syria. I mean, it says that putting at least 15 million people at risk. So this is not this is not an easy situation to handle. And I'm not even certain whether the particular government that is there, that Golani or Julani, whatever his name is, who has declared himself to be president, whether he even has the will to take care of the situation, because Syria is not a small country. It's a very big country, and it's kind of strewn all over Syria. So, I mean, until and unless there is a serious effort, including international organizations, to find these munitions and explode them, because this is going to continue. We do not know. I mean, forget about having a normal life. Most of these people are risking death each and every day.
Joshua Barnes, I wanted to come back to you. The UN has released a report today about the situation in Syria, the states that people are living in there. What can you tell me about this?
Yes, so the large country of Syria is in a state that is requiring a lot of support according to the UN. Of course, a 14-year period of fighting. That's a civil war. That's the overthrowing of al-Assad. But we're looking at a country which its current growth would mean that if the GDP were to return to the pre-civil war levels, it would take until 2080. 55 years at the current rate of growth without geopolitical, without worldwide interjection. It's not a position the UN sees as possible. To give you another idea of the state of Syria at the moment, 9 out of 10 people are currently living in poverty. Now, with a country with as many people that are there, with a country the size that it is, the job for the new government is it's an almost impossible task. 9 out of 10, 90% living in poverty. Since the war started in around 2012, the civil war that is, 618,000 people have died. So there's been death, there's been devastation economically. And this report from the UN is highlighting that, but also calling on international support. Millions within Syria have been displaced over the years of fighting. People haven't been able to set up a home. People haven't been able to set up businesses. 1 in 4 people in Syria remain unemployed. With that level of poverty, with that level of unemployment, it's going to take millions, potentially billions, just to get the country back on its feet. Now, the diplomatic efforts that have come from Sharar and his government, he has, of course, spoken about needing support from Western nations. We've seen restrictions be lifted. We've seen flights returning to Syria. But don't get it wrong, the situation in Syria, whether the war is ongoing or not, is dire. And there needs to be support from countries across the world, from organisations like the UN, to get Syria back on its feet. Now, the question remains, with all the geopolitical uncertainty that we're seeing, not just in the Middle East, but with Russia and Ukraine and the US input into that, we're also looking at the South China Sea and East Asia, where there is, of course, tension that is growing, and the untold difficulties that certain governments are facing with their own economies. The question remains, where's the money going to come from? Who's going to want to support Syria in the way that they need, so it's not 2080 until they're back on their feet?
Joyita Basu and Joshua Barnes, thank you very much for joining us. The G20 foreign ministers met in Johannesburg amid global tensions with President Cyril Ramaphosa, urging unity and diplomacy. The absence of US Secretary of State Marco Rubio highlighted deep divisions. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov attended the meeting as EU officials reiterated support for Ukraine. Ramaphosa called for operation to address global crisis. Let's have a look at the report.
It is critical that the principles of the UN Charter, multilateralism and international law should remain at the center of all our endeavors. It should be the glue that keeps us together.
While sounding alarmed about the group's deepening divisions.
Our communications are good, and we will be building up all this as we continue addressing the issues that may appear to be difficult or challenges between us.
Top US diplomat and Secretary of State Marco Rubio was a notable absentee. When asked about his absence, Ramaphosa replied,
So this is not a boycott. This can be ascribed to a whole number of reasons, which he has stated, which we note. And we have resolved that we will, in the diplomatic process, be able to have those matters discussed, to have those matters dealt with, so that we are able to iron out wrinkles that may have appeared in our relationship.
The South African president said there is a lack of consensus among major powers, including in the G20, on how to respond to these issues of global significance. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov did attend the meeting, alongside officials from EU nations that have pledged continued support for Ukraine and condemned Russia's aggression. Ramaphosa reminded the attendees that cooperation is our greatest strength as the G20. We must continue to advocate for diplomatic solutions to conflicts. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates coming in from across the Indo-Pacific. Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong warned international airlines flying between Australian airports and New Zealand to be aware of Chinese warships. This warning was issued after observing China conducting a live fire exercise in the Taiwan Sea. Australian military ships planes have been monitoring the Chinese warships for days as they pass in international waters off the Australian east coast. Speaking on the size of the ocean, Wong added that they could have parked somewhere less inconvenient while they flexed their muscles. South Korean officials have asked the Trump administration to exclude their country from US plans to impose aggressive tariffs on trade partners. They emphasized that Seoul is already applying low duties on American products under the free trade agreement between the two nations. Korean Deputy Trade Minister Park Jong-won requested while traveling to Washington that South Korea be excluded from US plans. He aims to establish reciprocal tariffs with trade partners and raise duties for imported steel and aluminium. He made this request to the Department of Commerce and the Office of the US Trade Representative, but hasn't heard from them since. The leaders of Hong Kong's Democratic Party have announced plans to dissolve what was once the city's largest opposition group. Chairman Lo King-hei said members will soon vote whether to shut down the party. The Democratic Party has been struggling to survive following moves by China to crack down on dissent in the city in the wake of the 2019 protests. Beijing and Hong Kong's government have argued that such moves were necessary for national security. Thailand is pushing for trade agreement negotiations with Gulf countries to enhance trade, tourism and investment, according to Naili Tavisian, chair of the Thai Trade Representatives. The Gulf countries represent Thailand's most important market in the Middle East. Last year, trade between the two sides amounted to approximately $36 billion. Non-oil and natural gas trade grew nearly by 10% and continues to show a positive trend. Chairperson Tav Si Len proposed that Thailand and the GCC focus on collaboration in tourism, food security and soft power areas. The Singapore government has launched a direct cash assistance program to provide financial support to residents facing economic challenges. Through this initiative, individuals can receive cash and aid ranging from $400 to $850, which will be directly credited to their bank accounts. This timely financial support aims to help recipients manage their cost of living and meet essential daily expenses. Brazil's former right-wing leader, Jair Bolsonaro, has come out stating that he is a victim of Silva's authoritarian regime. This comes a day after the leader and 34 others were charged with a coup attempt. This goes back to the Brazilian election of 2022. Here is a full update.
Brazil's former conservative president Jair Bolsonaro has now accused the ruling party of an authoritarian regime, which is concocting accusations against him. This comes after he was charged with orchestrating a coup bid. The 5 charges against the accused include the crimes of coup d'état, the attempt to violently abolish the democratic rule of law, and armed criminal organization. If found guilty, Bolsonaro could face up to 40 years in prison. Various lawmakers have also responded to the charges, including Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who has talked about his faith in the judicial system.
Ora, se na hora que o juiz for julgar, chegar à conclusão que eles são culpados, eles terão que pagar pelo erro que cometeram.
Que não estamos aqui uma questão de disputa política, vingança, nosso opositor. Não. O que houve é muito sério. Tem a ver com democracia.
The charges are based on an 884-page police report accusing the 69-year-old of masterminding a plot to prevent President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva from taking office after the 2022 elections. According to investigators, the alleged coup plan failed because Brazil's top military leaders did not support it. Bolsonaro is described in the indictment as the head of a criminal organization which attempted to prevent, in a coordinated manner, the result of the 2022 presidential elections from being fulfilled. According to prosecutors, the final attempt to stop Lula from taking power was an attack by Bolsonaro supporters on the presidential palace, Congress and Supreme Court in Brasilia on January 8, 2023. The plan, called Yellow and Green Dagger, was supposed to be implemented on December 15, 2022, but failed. In June 2023, Bolsonaro was also disqualified from running for office until 2030, after making unsubstantiated claims that the electoral system was unreliable. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some updates from the world of business. US private equity firm KKR has secured a 57.92% stake in Fujisoft in a fierce battle with rival Bain Capital to take the Japanese software developer private. Both KKR and Bain had upped their bids multiple times, with KKR ultimately prevailing with its offer. Fujisoft's board supported KKR over Bain, prompting Bain to make a hostile bid in December and ramp up its criticism of the board, citing strong concerns and distrust over its handling of the privatization process. Mercedes-Benz plans to increase profits in its car division to 10% or more after a 40.5% drop in earnings for 2024. The company aims to cut production costs by 10% by 2027 and launch new models to boost sales. However, it expects lower returns of 6% to 8% in 2025 and fewer car sales than the 1.98 million sold in 2024. CEO Ola Cornelius said the company is taking steps to become more efficient and competitive. Renault reported a record operating profit of 4.3 billion euros in 2024, beating expectations thanks to lower costs and new car launches. Revenue rose 7.4% to 56.2 billion euros, driven by popular electric and hybrid models. The company met its 2024 profit margin target of 7.6%, but lowered its 2025 forecast to at least 7% due to stricter European carbon emission rules. Renault plans to offer discounts on electric cars and raise petrol car prices to meet targets. iPhone supplier Murata Manufacturing plans to invest over $665 million in acquisitions to drive growth, focusing on inductors, sensors, and overseas markets. The company aims to scale up significantly within 3 years and has set a strategic investment target of 220 billion yen by March 2028. Murata also plans to expand factory capacity in Japan, Thailand, and India. Dixon Technologies India expects to more than double its revenue this fiscal year, driven by India's booming electronics manufacturing sector. The company reported a 45% revenue growth in 2024, reaching $2 billion. It assembles smartphones for Google, Xiaomi, and Oppo, and is expanding into component manufacturing as India boosts incentives for local production. Lenovo reported a 20% rise in third quarter revenue to $18.8 billion, surpassing analyst expectations. Net profit reached $693 million as the global PC market showed modest recovery, with Lenovo maintaining its top position with a 24.5% market share. The company is expanding beyond PCs into AI-driven software, services, and AI-capable computers, which are expected to make up 25% of shipments by 2025. And this is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.